I'm feeling pretty bullish this week. We have some great developments with ties between Hedera and Mastercard, a new social media initiative, some great entries into the Hedera Hackathon, and much more. Welcome back. I'm Brandon, the HBAR Bull, once again joined by Zepsi. We both do some contract work for the HBAR Foundation, but we don't do these weekly updates in any official capacity. We're just coming to you personally to give you the latest in the Hedera ecosystem. Welcome, Zep.
How's it going, Brandon?
It's going good, but as always, none of this is financial advice. Use it for entertainment or educational purposes only. So is that what we're going to kick this off this week is Fresh Supply Co. Now, we've had Fresh Supply Co. on in the past. We were talking about them transitioning from Mastercard Provenance, which was sunset, over to Hedera. They said at the time that they were also going to start to have payments at some point, and we're seeing that now. What we're seeing is them leveraging Hedera and Mastercard multi-token network to facilitate those payments. I caught up with David. He is the CEO over there. He had some fantastic insights, but what's more is they had a demo for us. They brought on some of their other team members and ran us through the entire thing. Really exciting stuff, so let's check it out. David, welcome back. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, David, I know we've had you on before, but I'd like to get a quick refresher as to what FSCO is.
Well, initially we started in supply chains, tracking assets or goods. Really what we focus on today is that infrastructure that supports the exchange of goods. What are the things? What's the nature of those things? Have they met the required conditions? And money. And we feel that we're very close to digital money. So that will be stable coins, tokenized deposits, etc. So understanding the digital representation of things using ledgers as an efficient way to exchange in a atomic settlement or DVP type transaction of goods and money. And there's nothing new about that. The exchange of goods and money has been the core of commercial activity since antiquity, right? Since Mesopotamia and, extremely olden times, right?
Now, one of the things when we first talked to you about your supply chain use cases, you were using MasterCard Provenance. Now, that was being sunsetted, and that's what prompted you to move to Hedera in one area. But what you're doing now is getting into something else called MasterCard Token Network, or MTN. Before we get into exactly what you're doing, can you explain what that is?
Well, it's a messaging service in between multiple MasterCard issuing banks. Any bank can use it. You have to be a bank, right? But it utilizes tokenized deposits. So tokenized deposits are a different way of looking at money on ledger and payments on ledger, rather than using stable coins, right? Which are a great technology. They offer settlement finality. They're instantaneous, and you can see the transfer between your wallets, etc. And they're a great innovation, right? Banking is highly regulated, right? So the ability to be able to say, and this is much like how banks, commercial banks and central banks interact. We'll say that, yep, there is money in this account. This person's requesting X amount of money. They do have it, and we'll transfer it to you, and we'll settle that at the end of the day. So what we're doing is we're making a representation of a request for money. Multi-token network is double checking between the different banks that the monies are available, and then making that instantaneously available. So that's a closed and private system. But we do believe in atomicity, or supporting those DVP type transactions. So the good or the NFT, the 721 is not on multi-token network. That representation of what the goods are and who the wallets, the buyer, the seller, that's all being run, and our infrastructure is being run on Hedera, on mainnet. So that representation of someone offered goods, we use MTN as a payment conditionality, payment trigger, and double checking that there's money inside of the banks between those two related parties, right? That is MTN.
Understood. Now, this sounds pretty innovative on what MTN is. Is anybody else doing this? Do they have any competitors?
Well, there are tokenized deposits are really squarely aimed at banks. You Google it, you do the research. It's a kind of a select handful. Your JP Morgans, Citibanks, regulated liability network, DYOR. That's pretty much it. So it's, again, very payment and interbank driven, right? So the ability for us to be able to develop deploy our application on top of it, and then create that representation, the tokenized asset which can be swapped between the buyer and the seller, and that existing on mainnet, I would say that's what makes it interesting, right? So these are serious payments for serious bankers, right? Using fractionalized fractionalized reserve systems settling in between themselves, but really finding the efficiency of the ledger, avoiding regulatory scrutiny, but still being able to represent this is the thing, the buyer's requesting money, being able to do that on ledger, and you'll be able to have a look at our application, our app, and being able to utilize the benefits of wallet-based infrastructure, these custodial applications, and moving the asset between the two, and then having that receipt, I would say, saying that payment has been made via this specific secure messaging service, right? That is financial grade.
What's the asset itself? What is it representing?
The asset is an invoice or debt, right? So goods being exchanged. So what is the nature of the goods? It could be containers of things. It could be tons of things. It could be a mortgage. It could be debt, right? It could be short-term flow between two parties. So a thing that has value is being exchanged for money. That's basically it. It's just utilizing a tokenized deposit for instantaneous kind of payment.
Why is what you're doing so important for not just you and Fresh Supply Co, but Hedera as well? So I'm curious how these efficiencies, why you're going down this road and trying to implement this.
Well, in a highly regulated space, obviously we want to be able to utilize the best of what ledger technology makes available, right? Representing those things. And I'm a firm believer that things are migrating that way. In 10 and 15 years, this will not be abnormal or unusual. But right now, there's regulation, right? And bankers prefer tokenized deposits. Now, how does that correspond, or how does that work with something like, like a public ledger, right? How can how can multiple parties view that thing or bundle it together and securitize it? That's where it's important. So abstracting away the complexity and just saying, hey, we'll run an application. There'll be an interbank settlement, right? That's private, but the representations of what was sold and who got paid for it, that's all being put on Hedera. So, effectively, any bank that wants to ascribe or sign up to MTN can utilize the benefits of that. And the goal of that is MTN is not to be, they want to operate with any chain, whether that's ETH, mainnet, or Hedera, right? And so the first chain that we'll be integrating with, where the assets are being represented and the receipt of payment, is on Hedera, on mainnet. So we believe in public ledgers.
That's exactly what we want to hear. So what scale could we potentially be talking about with this?
Look, I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver, but you realize trade and B2B type payments, and you look at RTGS, there are trillions of dollars flowing through it, right? So I think it's a case of technology has, or regulation has not kept pace with the technology, and that's understandable. Look, these are larger scale B2B payments made in between banks and larger B2B type customers, right? So millions of payment volume is pretty normal. If we look at the whole space and the space that needs to be migrated over, you can just Google Bain, look at tokenization, right? There's various views on it, but it's in the trillions of dollars, right? And so again, in order to tap into, we play more in the bridging TradFi to ledger space, right? Not so much smaller retail payments. So the size of the prize is large. I think part of the key is abstracting away and making it simple from a UX perspective, being respectful of regulation and making it de-risked. I think a lot of times in our, as enthusiasts, we're excited by things and we'll just use them. Large organizations can't think the same way, and they're regulated in a different way.
And finally, when does this actually hit the mainnet? When will we start to see the transactions on the mainnet?
Some early stage transactions and testing are already on the mainnet. So when banking partners begin to use it, I would imagine over this calendar year and into next year, you'll see more transactions. There'll be subsequent stuff in the news, which is, again, around banks signing up to multi-token network. We're very Asia focused. So, Japan, Australia, Singapore, Hong Kong. Again, over time, banks will utilize it. And that translates to transaction volume, right?
Yeah, that's it. That's what we're all looking for. So I understand you also have a demo for us.
Oh, yes. Let me pull in the guys. Hi again, guys. There's Phil and Dale as part of our team. Dale and Phil will be demonstrating our DApp that runs on Mastercard MTN. The asset is actually housed on, and the NFT is on Hedera mainnet, but we're using a Mastercard multi-token network as a payment messaging service, right? the representation of the goods that are on offer, what is being sold, to whom, requesting that money, and then it being able to be withdrawn from a bank or one of the two banks that the buyer and seller are interacting with. We basically abstract that away in our application, right? So Dale, Phil, take it away.
Perfect. So let's first start with creating an asset. Dave mentioned using generative AI and using that metadata to be connected to an NFT. So I've taken the liberty of already using a real world asset. In this case, it's a commercial invoice. We've used our Hero product, which is an LLM and AI based product, to extract all the pertinent data from this invoice. So here are our prompts. Here's the extracted data. I can then create an asset. For this one, let's go demo invoice. We can create an ERC20 as well as a 721, and of course we write in the mainnet. So with that, let's go to our custom data and the document that we've uploaded. Show right there.
And what you're seeing on this end is how easy it is to be able to pull that information and tokenize from documents. That in and of itself is a great achievement, right? So there you go. That's the constituents of that NFT, and we've used generative AI to make that standardized. But then that leads into a financial application, those trade payments. So there you go. All of the critical information, it's there, it's available, it's easy, and it's on mainnet.
Sure, and we'll go through the MTN workflow. So the purpose of the MTN workflow is to use tokenized deposits. The product is called Earmark because that's exactly what it does. In order to facilitate atomic settlement, Mastercard will on-bank financiers or financial institutions and then check for proof of funds and transfer the asset and the tokenized deposit, which is the Earmark, immediately. And then there'll be remittance to follow. So let's go ahead and create an asset. I'll be acting as the seller. As you see, there are no digital assets. So again, we'll do the header. I'll select an NFT, go to mainnet. Right now, I'm going to bring all of the extracted data that we've used that we showed in our LLM product. I'll arbitrarily set it to a ton and let me choose two images. One is the invoice, and the next image is a real world example. So let me create the NFT. And while it's creating, we anticipate the sales link to have all of the metadata that's migrated from Hero, as well as the quantity and the weight. Perfect. The asset was successfully created. There it is. Let me sell this asset.
So imagine it's a commercial buyer that's listing something for sale. They're going to go then request payment, right? Now the thing is represented on mainnet. They're going to say, okay, you need to pay me X amount of money.
So I'm previewing the sales link. We anticipate the two images, the invoice, real world example, as well as all the pertinent metadata.
We have what the things are, and we're going to select MTN as the payment method. Is that correct, Dale?
That's correct. Let me exit that. That's the preview. Let me get the sales link.
So Brandon, what's happening now is the buyer will then receive that sales link, and they'll need to select the option that it's from a specific bank account.
So I've sent the sales link. Now let me stop sharing, and I'll have Phil take over.
So Phil, you'll be the buyer now, and he's going to create a sales link and the select payment from his bank account, which is connected and will settle through Mastercard MTN. So it'll be instantly available. Right? So Phil, take it away.
We've already put the amount, which is 10 British pounds. That's the default for MTN. And the method of payment will be bank tokenized deposits, which is the MTN. Great. So there's two wallets. There's one to handle the transfer of funds, and there's one to handle the transfer of the asset. So while we do that, Phil's going to simulate MTN, which is going to approve the earmark, and they're going to verify that there's proof of funds.
And just to add color to this, that's a real commercial payment for real money that's being tokenized, and double checking that the funds are available on MTN. But all of the infrastructure on the good, the invoice, is made very simple, and that's being stored on Hedera, on mainnet, right? And we'll show that in a second, but that asset is living on mainnet. And then once this transaction is made, that receipt, the proof that that transaction has been fulfilled, that X seller said this was okay, I accept, and I choose to pay out of my bank account on multi-token network, you see, it's all been extracted away. we're not messing around with the typical kind of wallets and that sort of thing, because you know what, a director of trade or some kind of analyst in the trade credit department is not going to be going into their MetaMask or Hashpack or this or that, right? They're going to be processing lots of payments for different invoices, right? And they'll be settling using a secure large-scale B2B enterprise type payment system. And that's what abstracts us away. But the key is that this lives on mainnet. But the sale is now complete because it took some time, right? But now we're going to see that the asset has actually moved to the buyer's wallet, and that the funds are immediately available in the seller's wallet. That's the magic. So can we show the mainnet transactions?
Yes. Let me just hop right on. And as you can see, I no longer have the asset. Phil, it's been transferred to the buyer wallet. So the transaction has been completed. We've successfully transferred the asset. So it's no longer in the seller wallet. It's been transferred to the buyer wallet. And everything is done off the smart contract based in Hedera. You can see the buyer has the asset. And let me share the contract. So this is the contract. Let me do all of the recent transactions. So we minted, it. Mainnet right here. We've minted it. Let me demonstrate that we've transferred it back to the contract and save transfer. So that shows that it's gone to the buyer wallet. Great. That wraps it up for our demo.
Guys, thank you so much for coming on and giving us this demo. We're seeing the trust layer of the internet here at work. David, do you want to bring it home for us and just kind of talk about the final impact of what we're doing here?
Well, let's talk about or mention the power of tokenized deposits. That, I mean, in the kind of serious banking sector, there are only very few players. So this is MTN is playing in the space of a JP Morgan, a Citi, an Onyx, right? So it's kind of a rarefied air, if I could say. But at the same time, that secure payment capability and modality is being augmented by representing the thing in an atomic or atomic-like transaction where the thing is being represented as an NFT that's been, you saw the workflow, very easily generated and standardized to a token using generative AI. And then there's a user experience that presents it. I'm a seller, I have this good. Guess what? The NFT lives on mainnet, right? So, I mean, love an NFT, but this is a different type of utility, right? It's not a profile picture. It's a representation of the goods, and that then gets exchanged, double checking, utilizing MTN, saying, hey, money exists in that bank account. And then if that is complete, if that transaction is completed, proof that that was accepted between two parties, wallets that exist on Hedera, and the goods, the NFT being exchanged to and given to the buyer once payment has cleared is what's been done, right? So this is tokenized deposits. It's generative AI to, smooth a tokenized deposit type workflow. And then it's integration with, the big swing for what Mastercard will be doing for banks on multi-token network. And we're believers and we're users in the, speed, the cost, energy efficiency of Hedera. And so this is the first, I would say, network that it's being integrated into. And it's definitely something the Hedera ecosystem should be proud of.
So unique to Hedera. That's exactly what we want to hear. David, thank you so much for taking some time today. Guys, thanks for the demo. We really appreciate it, and good luck. So Zeb, what I really liked about this is you heard them mention smart contracts. There was an account created on both sides of that transaction. Of course, those are really high value transactions for Hedera. It's 5 cents every time you create an account. It's 5 cents every time you have a smart contract call. So this could be a real revenue driver for Hedera. I'm really excited when I see that kind of stuff, even if it's not a huge amount of transaction volume. But you did hear David say how big this could potentially be. So we could get high volume and we could get high value transactions out of this. So the next thing we're going to get into, and actually it goes back to revenue on one of the entries, is the Hedera Hackathon that just closed down. So all the entries are in, and we're seeing some of our regular builders come in and participate. So Zeb, what were your thoughts on what we've seen come out around the hackathon so far?
Well, I mean, I've only seen 5 projects so far out of a whopping 2,100 entrants, I think. And I've been unbelievably impressed with them so far. And what I love the most is, like you just said, these are some of the most familiar faces in the ecosystem. The indie devs, the devs that have been here for, the last 4 or 5 years, the real community sort of powerhouses. We saw Tierbots, of course, the team there have been developing on the HCS20 and the Hashnals protocol and those casual games. We saw Bones Pixels, who's launched his own sort of pixel-esque game, building on his portfolio of NFT projects like HBAR and Pixel Land. He was one of the first movers in back in the start of NFTs. So seeing those casual games already. Then we've seen, the amazing work of HGraph with Brandon Davenport, tracking the Hedera revenue in a really, really beautiful UI. That whole experience of that website is amazing. And, that's a testament to Brandon's, own, sort of creative career as well. He's always been on that side of that sort of aesthetic side of business, I think, really making beautiful products and tracks and all this stuff. So it's great to see his creative mind and work there. And then also, of course, Milan, who's created this just insane, tap and go USDC payment system with hardware, with iOS wallets, with everything. And yeah, I think this hackathon is undoubtedly already the most innovative we've seen so far. And I'm so excited to see all the applicants for sure.
Yeah, just to go a little bit deeper on some of these, HGraph with their revenue tracker, you can toggle in and out at MyO. So taking out the highest revenue producer and the one that is subsidized, so you can see, the true revenue of the network. Now, I do think that revenue in the long term is the most important metric we could possibly have. Right now, it's of course market cap. I think that's the main scoreboard people look at. But I think in the future, as we get more serious investment in this space, revenue is going to be a really important one. So I love to see the work that they've done. We have Pluto, as you mentioned. This is something that personally I thought was really cool. And what he did was he created kind of a small metaverse that could evolve into gaming, but tying, of course, the Hashpack wallet to it, because the main thing was trading back and forth. He calls it the Grand Exchange. I love this for Twigital, the potential of showing off some of these physical objects and then having that exchange in just a few seconds of value for whatever the object is. I thought that was a really good one. We did have the game from Bones, so that was a really good one to see. Tierbot, you mentioned gaming, but really what he has in KiloScribe is the tools for dedicated inscription. So for all of this on-graph work, and like you said, he created one of his on-graph games to kind of highlight exactly the tools that he's brought to market. And finally, Milan. That one has got to be my personal favorite so far. A hardware payment solution built on Hedera using USDC. So the only thing that is really missing to have a vibrant economy using Hedera USDC is on-ramps and off-ramps. If we can get HUSDC on Coinbase, all the pieces are in place to facilitate something like Milan's no-mid. And Zeb, the other thing on Milan's use case is it got a lot of social media attention as well. And one of the things that you highlighted was that Peter Schroeder from USDC actually commented on it.
Yeah, so Pete Schroeder is the director of marketing at Circle. I met him at Paris Blockchain Week Summit this year. And he's shown a lot of interest in various parts of the Hedera ecosystem, but he actually came out and commented on Milan's hackathon entry saying, okay, this is incredible. We need more of this, clapping hands emoji. So I think it's really cool to see that Milan's work is not just being recognized in our own ecosystem, but also by figures like Peter at institutions like Circle that really hold such clout across this industry.
So what I really love about these entries is they're real business solutions that have tremendous potential for all kinds of companies out there. So hats off to everybody we mentioned, and I can't wait to see what else comes out of the hackathon. All right, so with that, we're going to jump into Shark Bites. Again, another great crop of questions this week, and Rob, as always, did not disappoint. Rob, welcome back. There's some good questions this week.
Yeah, there are. And hi, Brandon. I got some interesting feedback on Twitter over the last week, which isn't universally positive. So I'm going to try and, I never steer away from the hard questions, and the answers aren't always what everyone wants to hear. But I do have I have a particular perspective, but I don't know everything. I don't have perfect knowledge, and there are things that I can't say as well because we have a market integrity policy which precludes me from saying anything which could be taken as anything other than just kind of objective information. So I appreciate that that's not ideal for everybody all the time, but the kind of Twitter abuse that one gets is nothing compared with the what my sergeant major used to shout at me. So it's all good.
Well, you do this out of your own free time. You do it because you think that the community needs some insights on some of these things. So I don't think anybody can fault you for that, and you do the best you can. So, right?
For as
We'll
long
move
for as
on.
long as it adds value, I'll do it. When it stops adding value, and when people don't want it, then I'll stop doing it. It's all good.
Well, I think it adds plenty of value. We'll kick it off with this first question that comes from KJW, who says, question for Rob, how does Hedera intend to leverage itself as one of the few projects that are ISO 20022 compliant? How will the ISO evolution shape the future of the industry? It seems like it will start to expose winning projects. Now, Rob, from what I understand, it's not actually the layer ones that are ISO 20022 compliant. That was a myth that kind of started in the crypto ecosystem, cough, cough, BitBoy, who first started talking about that. It's the things that are built on top of it that can be compliant. But Rob, this is right up your alley. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and that's right. ISO 20022 is a messaging standard. It's the standard that many of the world's payment systems use to transfer information across the underlying rails. So if you take that into the Web3 space, the rails are still the DLTs and blockchains. And so the messaging layer, the data layer, the metadata, if you like, is still separate from the underlying layer. Now, there are things that differentiate Hedera, which make it uniquely good for building systems on which you transfer standard data. As we know, we've got our consensus service and our token service, which are very well positioned for doing that. Whether or not I don't think one would transfer payments as NFTs with metadata in the same way as they do. But one can embed in transactions references to data. The data itself can be hashed or encrypted in a way that can be independently verified without exposing all of the data. Clearly, we have rails in Hedera which are very, very scalable and so uniquely suited to systems like this. In addition to being enterprise grade, so the users, the enterprise users of the network have that comfort, have that ability to use the network in a way that is familiar to them. The old school Swift network, for example, is just this. It's albeit permissioned, but a very, very large network of nodes, banks that are transferring messaging information between them. And so in a Web3 world, that could be, the corollary is that we go to something like that. But yet the myth that blockchains can be ISO 20022 compliant or not is not what everyone thinks it should be. It's really all about interoperability and the standards for the messaging, the ability to kind of have a richness about that data. Transparency and compliance is really important as well in financial systems. So, of course, transparency and compliance are things that we excel at. Getting global adoption is really key as well. So we go cross-border payments. So the adoption on a global network is super important, which, of course, Hedera, in fact, all blockchains aspire to being globally distributed. Few, I think, are as globally distributed in terms of the coverage that Hedera have. Clearly not the scale of the network yet, but the coverage and the ability to innovate, the ability to utilize that messaging standard to build things on top of that platform, which maybe we haven't even thought of yet. And so standards and scale and the decentralized nature of the Hedera network actually add to all of those things. So that's what ISO 20022 aspires to. And I think ISO 20022 alignment is probably a better phrase than compliance.
That's fair. Carmel Cadet from MTech had a really good explanation on this as
She
well,
did,
but
yeah.
we need to reiterate because it keeps coming up over and over again. All right, so the next one we have comes from HBAR $10, who says, "Hey Rob, can the functionality of something like token swaps via smart contracts be built directly into the HTS layer, which would give the same TPS as HBAR and HTS transactions as well as lower costs?" So the Stablecoin Studio is bringing together the smart contract service and the token service, but that's how I was kind of reading this question. But how do you read it?
Well, we already have atomic swaps. So our Hedera token service, I mean, maybe this is a little known fact, but we'll share the link here for atomic swaps. So on the Hedera token service, it's not necessarily, an exchange of token for HBAR. That transaction can be packaged in such a way that many tokens on one side can be exchanged for many tokens on the other side in a single atomic swap. I mean, this is pretty unique, I think, if not entirely unique in the Web3 space, and is already built into the Hedera token service transactional layer, which can be utilized by any users of those services. So, of course, we can go to smart contracts. We can create smart contracts that do the same thing, and maybe some logic in there would be a little bit more nuanced than the atomic swap service. I think it's transfer transaction is the actual transaction, or the API call. But the smart contract approach is still valid if there is a purpose for it. But yes, utilizing the base layer is always my preferred approach as well, because it's simpler, it's tested, and it's cheaper.
Yeah, it just doesn't have the flexibility that smart contracts have at times.
Well, smart contracts, they're you've got to strike a balance with smart contracts, and I think there's a time and place to use them. But if there is a native service that does the same or similar, then why not use it?
Yeah, fair enough. All right, the next one comes from Naza for Rob. Last year was a bad year in terms of the number of new members added to the governing council. Unfortunately, it looks like we're going to have a similar year to last year. Is there any hope of filling the governing council by the end of the year, beginning of next year? Oriol Vila had a similar one. He said, Rob said months ago that the governing council will be complete in the beginning of 2025. Is he still believing that? Now, I remember that conversation, and Shane actually said that he was hoping we would have a full council by the end of 2024. And you were pushing that back a little bit, saying that it would extend probably into 2025. We had a pretty good pace going there in the beginning of the year, but we've also lost one most recently with DBS. But Rob, you're close to this and bringing new people onto the governing council. How do you think we're looking right now as far as filling the governing council?
We still have a strong pipeline. So what I said a month or two ago was that MEMCOM, so our membership committee, has the objective to fill all 39 seats in 2024. And the membership committee are working towards that. We have a strong pipeline. The committee co-chairs, Bill Miller and Simon Olsen, spend a lot of time interviewing and in the procedural part of educating and advising and then navigating the process of onboarding. But ultimately, it's on the candidate for that position, that seat on the governing council, to navigate their own internal processes. And depending on the organisation, it might be quite a simple step, or it could be quite a tortuous. Banks have a lot of hurdles to jump over to achieve the requirements of joining the governing council, which are to own a 39th share in the Delaware incorporated business, to host a node, to do all the things that we have to do as part of the LLC agreement. So even though we have a strong pipeline, there are things that are outside our control. Do I think that we'll fill it by the end of this year? Probably not. I said before, it'll go into next year, I would think. And I think that's the right thing as well. As we've got fewer seats available, we need to be more careful about being able to have that diversity and decentralization that the governing council needs to have. So, we've got, we don't have any NGOs, and we want one or two NGOs on the council. There are sectors which are poorly represented. And so, we might have a dozen banks over here kind of banging at the door, but actually we want the best NGO, for example. I mean, it's just that's not the case, but that could be the situation. So we can be a lot more picky as we go forward, which again slows the process down. But I think we're in a strong position. I don't think that there's been any real downside to DBS kind of leaving the council. They weren't particularly active anyway, so that's a good thing, right? It frees up a seat for an active member, and all of the latest batch, over the last year, 18 months, of the new members come with a use case and come, with a far clearer idea about why they want to join and how they're going to contribute, and it's great to see them all, attending the committees and participating and contributing in certainly in CorpCom, where I co-chair, but also on the council. So I'm not worried if we don't fill the council this year. Everyone likes to celebrate a new council member, and I'm as much as anyone else do. But one of the things about our market integrity policy is that I don't know. There's a kind of silence after the process, and then those candidates could take a week, they could take 6 months to actually get to the announcement, and they have to announce it themselves. This isn't something that Hedera pushes. They have to volunteer the time frame in which they are comfortable with, for announcing these things, and that might be, there are all sorts of reasons that business, in terms of market conditions or market reporting, if they're listed businesses or their own strategic cycles, there may be lots of reasons why they have a particular time frame for making the announcement, and they don't join the council until that announcement is made. So it's largely out of our hands after we've done the initial legwork to get to the point where the council votes for them to join, and then if the time frame is up to them. I am certain we will have a full council before long, but whether it's before the end of this year, I wouldn't want to say.
Always a hot topic.
Yes.
We appreciate you covering it yet again.
When we have a full council, the questions will be, well, what about these ones who are not so active, or what about the ones rolling off? Who are they going to be replaced by? So I think will continue to be a topic, almost forever. But that's good. I mean, it's a good topic. It's a differentiator for Hedera as well, and it drives a lot of debate. There's a lot of layer ones that wish that they had a governance model like us. And our governance model will get better. We're currently in a review period of, how do we improve? How do we tighten? How do we cut costs? How do we be the best possible governing body in the world for what we are doing? And so that's something that's continually improving as well. So.
They're fun conversations to have. I remember one of the very first conversations we were talking about our dream council members. Yeah. This is back in Telegram in 2018. Sure. We were having these conversations, and the thing that really shocked me is we've met or exceeded what our dream council would have looked like. So we've had a lot of success in that department. There's no question about it. All right, so the next one comes from Lewis, who says, Rob mentioned special purpose networks bringing money to Hedera was a sticky issue. He mentioned the new mirror node query as a potential revenue generator. Any updated ideas on those SPNs bringing money back to the main Hedera network? Any thoughts there, Rob?
Yeah, well, there are two different things there. We talked about the HIP last week, which enables or would enable third parties to monetize topics and access to the network via those topics. And that's not what a SPN is about, although I'm sure those things might be overlapping at some point. The special purpose networks are Hashgraph, or formerly known as Swirls Labs, way of addressing a gap in the market, which is that there is still a need, in my view, a decreasing need in terms of number of use cases, but there is still a need that enterprise perceives for which a private network as opposed to a fully public network is necessary. And that might be, because there's commercially sensitive information being transferred. It might be there's user privacy issues. There may be the commercial kind of interactions between counterparties. All of those things may be true or not. So, and we're not the only layer one that is addressing this as well. There are a couple of the other layer ones have realized that this is a potential gap in the market, that there is an opportunity there for monetizing this need, perceived or real, and are going after it. Clearly, we have a position in the Web3 space, which is enterprise focused, and so it's right that Hashgraph identifies this as an opportunity and seeks to fill the gap. We've got the best technology. We should actually have the best proposition for those sets of use cases as well. Hedera and Hedera Governing Council continues to govern the public network. I mean, that's what we are there for. And the public network, the mainnet, will remain in its kind of evolving state. Special purpose networks are designed to utilize the mainnet in I don't know this to be entirely factual, but my assumption here, based on my conversations with Eric and Mance and what I've seen in public, is that there are a variety of ways that special purpose networks could be implemented. It could be the Hedera technology with kind of fully anchored in the mainnet, a bit like an appnet, I guess, but as a separate layer. And in doing so, that anchoring creates the transactional flow. So an example of this might be an IoT network that needs millions of transactions a second, let's say. That would overload the mainnet, and any kind of idea about scalability. Architecturally, it might be better to actually have a special purpose network to address that special purpose. Decentralized physical infrastructure, as an example, at a massive scale. But anchoring into the trust layer, anchoring into the mainnet, would require those anchor points to be paid for, so transactions. Now, it may not be on millions of transactions a second. Those transactions may be batched or encrypted in some way, and then there's the anchoring is done to enable the special purpose network to have the underlying trust of the mainnet. That's just one example.
So, Rob, real quick, when you're saying, I'm curious how you would do that. So you would batch a bunch of transactions from the decentralized physical infrastructure use case or IoT use case, and you would put all of that information in the metadata, and then you would put that into one transaction that then gets put on the mainnet?
It could be. I mean, I'm just speculating here, but yes, you could do that, and that would be cheaper, obviously. For the commercial viability of the special purpose network, you might want to do that. You may want to. That's probably the most simplistic way of anchoring the SPN with the mainnet. But we talked about interledger communication protocol last week as well. So the being able to have, I mean misusing Web3 terms, but a side chain for the mainnet as opposed to a layer 2 for the mainnet. These are kind of different concepts. But the sidechain may have a special purpose as well. It might be, a payments network, let's say, that has a very particular purpose and needs to be commercially contained. You might need an interledger communication protocol to transfer value from one to the other. So in all these ways, the special purpose networks give us new ways to take a kind of step back macro view. And the Hedera mainnet underpins all of these different shared worlds, right? I mean, these could be seen as entirely, different networks that are interconnected and underpinned by, a layer 0, if you like, a foundational layer that kind of makes them all secure, makes them all trusted, and they inherit the mainnet base layer beneficial properties of trust into those special purpose networks. And this is something which is, Hashgraph is looking at doing. It's something which will be entirely Hashgraph's kind of business model. It's something of interest to the governing council, but it doesn't detract from the fact that we have, these this underlying network, which is, it's like, often referred to the next generation internet. That's how I see Hedera, is that kind of next generation internet. And then all of these different things get built on top of it, and it doesn't have to be small applications, dApps. It could be, rather large additional networks that utilize it too. But the questioner asked about the revenue coming back to the network from all of these things, and I think it's there won't be one model. There'll be many different ways that the mainnet is utilized by special purpose networks, and each of those will bring revenue in different ways.
All right, it's going to be interesting to see how it develops.
Absolutely.
So the next question is a perennial one. Again, we get the governing council all the time, and we also get community nodes all the time. And this first one comes from Light Larry, who says, "Thanks for the update, Brandon. For the next one, can Rob provide an update on community nodes? The fact that Hedera is still permissioned deters many from using the network, so I think it would be an absolute priority. It's a win-win for the ecosystem and will bring liquidity in." So any updates on community nodes there, Rob?
It is perennial, and I always start the answers to this particular type of question with, although it's called a community node, one has to remember that it's not a super lightweight node at the moment. It's not a super lightweight node that anyone can download and would be able to spin up and participate in consensus straight away. I mean, longer term, we have that goal of fully permissionless autonomous nodes. Community nodes are the step between this governing council network and those onion layers beyond it. And the first onion layer will be still permissioned. It'll be trusted third parties who are not governing council members but still want to participate in consensus and run a node for whatever reason. And that might be dozens. And then the next onion layer will be hundreds potentially, and then thousands. And this path to decentralization that we talk about envisages this kind of gradual growth of the network, and the growth of the network kept in step with the usage of the network. So it has to be self-sustaining. And then ultimately we go to permissionless autonomous nodes. I know the community, I'm a community member as well. I know the community want to own the nodes, but the first stage of community nodes will be the kind of the business community that support the network and all the trusted third parties that provide that support and want to participate in consensus. But further down the road, it'll become more and more true retail community members will be able to participate in consensus. That's not has been removed from the roadmap at all, but it's further down the track. These nodes at the moment are quite hefty, and there are a few things that need to be done in order that even trusted third parties can run one and host them. There are things like in Ethereum, there's this post-merge, I think I mentioned it the other day, post the Ethereum merge changes, they talk about the verge and the splurge and the other urges. And Verge is about actually pruning out historical data and making a moving historical state into less accessible data storage to make the nodes more lightweight. Our roadmap includes something like that because clearly, we're doing 2,000 plus transactions a second. We get to quite a big, even at the hash graph layer. I'm not talking about the mirror node layer, but even the hash graph layer, you get quite a large demand on these nodes. So there's some work that needs to be done there first before community nodes can become a thing. We've got dynamic address books that are being worked on, so nodes can be added to the network and removed from the network dynamically. At the moment, we need a mainnet upgrade to add a new node in or remove one. So dynamic address books are a dependency here. All the DevOps tasks, the node operations, all of that needs to be fully automated. And then the actual node economics of community nodes needs to be worked out in detail as well. So there's a few dependencies, and there's plenty of others, of course, but there's a few dependencies that are being worked on by the core engineering team before we get to that point. As always, there are lots of other priorities and demands from HIPs or demands from the wider community, or other parts of the roadmap in terms of scaling or special purpose networks or everything else that the Hashgraph team and core engineering team are constantly looking at. But absolutely, community nodes are still there. They're still, I know they're not explicitly on the roadmap, but they're still part of our journey for decentralization. And things like the data pruning or the historical state removal, the dynamic address books, the automation tasks, the transaction tools, and node economics are all actually underway. So, it's not as if it's parked and it will never get there. It's a continuum that we will get to. I don't want to put a time frame on it, but I don't think it's too far out. Probably next year.
It'll come eventually. We get to these things and then they're behind us and we're always looking forward to the next thing. But there is going to be more individual involvement, even though individuals might not be running the nodes themselves. There's going to be interesting tokenomics factors for this as well. When we say community nodes, it may be, the saucer swap team, or it may be the hashpack team that's running the node, and they're going to get, a reward for doing that. We have rewards going to the token holders for staking, and then there's going to be a node reward as well.
Yeah.
They may, once they cover their cost, use some of those rewards to try to get stake for their node and so forth.
Sure.
So it'll be more dynamic than what you're seeing right now. So it'll be a huge step, and it'll be fun to watch as it develops.
Yep. Yeah, we're still,
right.
I hate saying it's cliched, but we are still early. And, this evolution is underway, and, sometimes it feels more glacial than it needs to be, but it is kind of progressing. So yeah, we're on the right path anyway.
All right, sounds good. The last one's a fun one. It comes from T-Mobe 1963, who says, question for Shark Bites. Love Rob's bookshelf. Are the books sorted by color? Now, I haven't paid all that much attention to it. I do see some of them that are color-coded.
So there we are. There is a spectrum above my head here, but during COVID, everyone wanted nice aesthetic backgrounds, and I like the idea of sorting the books, because I'm a big book fan. Sorting the books in kind of rainbow colors, but then you hit the problem with, I couldn't find the books anymore because I'm a kind of Dewey Decimal librarian guy, and the books were never in the right place. So over time, they've ended up not quite in the right place. Plus, I'm a massive Tolkien fan, so that was my ghost over here. Look, the lower shelf is all Tolkien books, so they're not color coded. And then the shelves above, look, they're not particularly color coded either. I've got a load of Bowie stuff over there. There's some art stuff, lots of Land Rover stuff. So it over time it's become less rainbow color coordinated. But this middle layer is probably the closest I still have to it. But thank you for noticing my book collection. This is just a fraction. I've got a whole library of books. So it's, I think books make a great addition to a house. It's they're hugely important source of knowledge, even today with access to pretty much anything at our fingertips. I do dip into my reference library pretty often.
My wife has been into books forever, and she just actually got a job at a library, and she's convinced me. You can check her out on Instagram, the Real Bookery. She has more followers than I do, but she wants an entire wall to be a bookshelf. So I'm going to be making that sometime this fall. I'm even going to do one of the sliding ladders. I think that's one of the things that she really wants. So I'm going to go all out on this one. Hopefully we'll see what that project looks like before too long.
Awesome.
But Rob, these questions were really good this week. We appreciate all your responses on this. Everybody else, keep dropping those questions down below. We love what we're getting from you. Rob, we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Brandon. See you next week.
All right, Zep. So I know we get into karate combat a lot, but the reason why we do is because it is an absolutely amazing use case, not just on Hedera, but across the entire crypto space. So they had a couple pieces of news come out. First, for Karate Combat 50, they're going to be at permissionless. So they're getting into this trend of doing their events alongside crypto events. I think this has tremendous potential. And one of the really cool things is it's not Karate Combat going to permissionless and consensus and token 2049, but they're actually coming to them because they want to have these really cool evening events associated with these conferences. The other thing was Only LARPing. He is somebody that we've had on several times, and he's the mastermind behind Up Only Gaming. He wants to spread that concept of Up Only Gaming across all kinds of sports and all kinds of leagues. He doesn't want to be on an island anymore. And this open source mentality is exactly what we want to see. They're offering their entire tech stack and all of their users as well. So how are they going to do that? Well, they're going to offer their entire tech stack. Another league or another sport can go ahead and integrate it into whatever they're doing. And then the karate token holders could potentially get an airdrop of the new token to be able to participate in these other sports. And of course, these other leagues are going to love that because they know these are people that are already interested in Up Only Gaming and sports in general. So I love to see this kind of stuff. So Zep, sticking with the fun stuff, that social media initiative that I mentioned, HBAR, has launched on Hedera. I love it because of its simplicity and how it integrates so seamlessly with the Hedera ecosystem. I caught up with the co-founder, the person that launched this, Ash. He works for Hashgraph. He had some really good insights as to why he launched this and just generally how to use it. So let's check that out. Ash, thanks for hopping on today.
Yeah, man. Thank you for inviting me on.
Well, before we get into what you've built most recently, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to Hedera?
Yeah, so I joined Hedera actually December 1st of 2021, believe it or not. So I think that was the end of the past bull cycle. But I have been in the crypto space for a very long time, even way back participated in the Ethereum crowd sale. So a long time ago. I'm an old man when it comes to crypto. I've been at one other layer one with EOS and Block One before I came to Hedera. But what really attracted me was governance in other ecosystems was always very difficult. And it was governance led by token holders. And I saw just a lack of participation of token holders, and it's very difficult to get governance passed. And so I was very attracted to the governance structure of Hedera. It reminded me of the governance structure, if you recall, the Libra project by Facebook, which was also modeled after the Visa governance structure. And so I thought that, this is definitely worth spending some time in. So yeah, I came over here and joined and immediately was asked to start running with NFTs. If you guys can all remember, back in 2021, NFTs were all the rage. So I started working with May from Hashpack and community members and helped create HIP 412, our ecosystem's metadata standards back then. Was one of the first things that I did when joining. And many of you will know me by mitbar.xyz, the first permissionless NFT mentor app for retail on Hedera. But yeah, we can get into anything, but I've been around the block.
Sure. Now, I mean, there's some debate. I've heard that Libra might have gotten some inspiration, we'll call it, from Hedera itself. So
they may have.
It's an interesting path to get to Hedera. So now we're going to talk a little bit about why we're actually here today, and that's your latest project. Can you explain HBAR and why you created it?
Yeah, thanks. So part of my responsibility and role at what was Hedera, then was Swirls Labs, and now is Hashgraph, is to focus on consumer engagement. Since the market has shifted a bit regarding NFTs, we started to shift some of my focus internally at Hashgraph to look at how companies, both Web2 and Web3 companies, were using tokens, not just NFTs, but fungible tokens as well, to try to create community engagement. And so I've spoken to a bunch of different teams for the past year, and many of them Web2 teams, and they just didn't, a lot of them just didn't seem to get it, because Web3 tokens within a walled Web2 garden just don't work nearly as well. They don't have nearly the same value that if you don't have that walled garden, right? And so earlier this year, I was excited about the base launch, and I saw a project called DGen, and where what we call barking, they call tipping, right? And it ran on Warpcast, the decentralized social media platform. Warpcast, Farcaster is the protocol. And I was really, really impressed about how it created an aligned incentive structure for people to engage on the platform. And you would see people tipping, barking, for all sorts of things. Somebody releases an awesome NFT project. Somebody releases a new feature for their DApp that was in demand. Somebody was having a down day. Somebody was having an up day. It was so much fun that I wanted to bring it to Hedera. And the vibes have been, a little bit on the low in our ecosystem lately. And I was like, this is a perfect time to launch something like this. And we finally, after about 3.5, 4 months of ideation, getting the art, the designs, thinking through the tokenomics and how to marry Web3 HTS tokens with Web2 tokens so that we could play this game on Twitter rather than Warpcast. I love Warpcast, but for me, if we want to go where the Hedera user is, we want to go to Twitter. That's where our community hangs out mostly. So yeah, I'm very proud to have brought this to Hedera, but also to Twitter. And I think it's the first SocialFi game of this kind to come out on Twitter. So.
Well, what I like is, it's a completely new space that I really didn't even think of when it came to Hedera. We have the mouth doing something kind of in the same space,
Yep.
and then we have now what's happening with HBAR and so forth. But just to explain exactly how people can get involved and how they can use it, can you just explain those steps of how somebody that wants to use HBAR, how they could do that?
Yeah, thank you. So HBARC is our utility token on Hedera. And by holding HBARC, you earn Bark Power, which is a Web2 token. You earn Bark Power every 24 hours. When you log into our website with your Hedera account, you'll see how much Bark Power you have. And this is not linear relationship between how much HBARC you have, but we've got an algorithm in the background that's figuring out based on how much HBARC token you have, that's how much Bark Power you earn every day. Where you use your Bark Power, once you link your Hedera account and your Twitter account, you use your Bark Power to bark for anyone on Twitter, inside or outside of the Hedera ecosystem. You'll spin down your Bark Power, again, just a Web2 token, to call attention to reward whoever you want for whatever you want. And then once your Bark Power has been all used up, you come back at 8 o'clock Eastern and you get more Bark Power each day.
I got you. Now, how about the steps of how somebody actually goes and gets Bark in the first place? Where can they get it? Then how do they tie their Twitter account to the ecosystem to be able to participate?
Yeah. So you can go to Saucer Swap. We launched a liquidity pool, and those tokens have been locked since March, and they're locked through, I think like February next year or something. I'm fully doxxed on the project, and I work for Hashgraph, so this is not a rug. But you go to Saucer Swap in the LP pool, and of course, just buy HBARC. And then you don't have to lock it up. You don't have to stake it or anything. You can just leave it in your wallet, and our scripts are going to scrape, and see who on what accounts on HBARC, and we'll start allocating Bark Power for it. Now, you do have to link your Twitter, unlike Warpcast, which innately or natively has your account ID on the platform. Twitter obviously doesn't know about your Hedera account ID. So we have a little function on our website that sometimes is a little bit buggy, sometimes it works correctly, but remember, we're just in day 4 here. We're working through some bugs, but once you go to our website and log in with your Hedera wallet, you'll click the Verify Twitter button, and it's going to ask you to sign a little message that just says verifying for the barking game. This is so that we can tell who you are. This is no different than signing into OpenSea or signing into anywhere that requires you to sign an off-chain message. Once you do that, you'll get a very short tweet with a hashtag and an encrypted code. You just post it on your Twitter. And then we're always looking for that hashtag and seeing if that code matches someone that was on our website. And once you do that, it's linked, and you never have to link it again. And you can just continue to bark every day. And 8 o'clock, you get refilled.
All right, so first step is to go on Saucer Swap, buy some of the HBARC token, and then you can go and link that account on the HBARC website, and then you'll go ahead and tap to connect to Twitter, which just gives you a message. It may automatically open you up on Twitter. You might copy that message, put it on Twitter, and then you just post it, and you're pretty much all set, right? That's
it. That's all you got to do. And the best thing is you never have to send anyone your HBARC tokens. So when you bark for someone, this is the most important part. When you bark for someone, you're not transferring, you're not signing a message. You don't have to send them any of your HBARC tokens. You're just telling our game who to issue tokens to and how many tokens to issue them so that they're available for that person to claim when the season ends, when season one ends, right? So you don't have to come off of anything. You're earning the permission to tell our barking engine who and how much to allocate during each season. Then when the claim window opens at the end of each season, that person will be able to come in and claim those HBAR tokens.
And you're just doing that with replies. So you see something out there, a post that you think is worth giving a bark to, you just put 1,000 HBARK or $sign HBARK, and then you're all set. That's it.
That's it. That's all you got to do. Yep, that's it.
All right, that's perfect. These are the kind of simple things that can become really innovative in the long term. But is there anything else you'd like to pass on before we let you go?
No, that's it. Just check out @thebarkinggame on Twitter.
All right, perfect. Well, Ash, we appreciate you hopping on today, and we appreciate you building this on Hedera.
Thank you, Brandon. My pleasure. See you guys.
Yeah, so it's so cool, I think, to see Ash there, from Hashgraph, who works very, very closely with a lot of the teams in, the tokenization, NFT, digital asset, gaming side of the ecosystem. And to see him come out with his own project, which he's done many a times before, he's come out with NFT tooling, HIPs, this kind of stuff. But now to have his own sort of new project that everyone can engage with, I think is really cool. And that's actually based on a model that went on Base Network, which is the L2 from Coinbase, which saw a lot of success over there. And I think it's a really addictive model, a really cool way of rewarding community members for their input. And I'd love to see people sort of leveraging that as much as possible.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. We also had another team that's building on Hedera. Sirio had some news, and I liked the collaboration with another network we see out there. Do you have any information on what came out around Sirio and Filecoin?
Yeah, so Sirio, lending and borrowing protocol coming to Hedera, put out this announcement saying, "We are proud to announce our partnership with Filecoin and Lighthouse Web3 based on 3 points. Decentralizing our AI, decentralizing the AI we'll offer as a business-to-business service, and 3, interoperability solutions." So where Filecoin comes into this is Filecoin will be assisting Sirio in the process of decentralizing AI by providing the necessary infrastructure for storing data sets and graphs thanks to the Lighthouse. Alongside this, Sirio aims to offer this model as a customized solution for other lending and borrowing protocols. And Filecoin here will enable them or help them make this service more transparent and decentralized. So we're seeing here, a team built on Hedera for their lending and borrowing protocol, working directly with Filecoin, who are very, very interested in the AI side of the Web3 ecosystem, to create a decentralized AI model that'll interact with that lending and borrowing protocol on Hedera. And Filecoin actually put out their own announcement alongside that saying, in case you missed it, Sirio Finance and the Lighthouse Web3 teams are bringing the Filecoin and Hedera ecosystems closer together than ever before. So yeah, really exciting to see Filecoin leaning into the DeFi side of our ecosystem, and not just the Filecoin green, the sustainability side, but also that DeFi side. So hopefully that'll be additional marketing, additional users, and all the benefits that kind of relationship could bring.
Yeah, we're seeing more of these collaborations with Chainlink. We're seeing them with Filecoin. I also love to see the lending and borrowing side of our ecosystem starting to gain some traction. Of course, we already have Liquidity in the market. Sirio is going to be coming before too long. And we also have Bonzo Finance, which is going to be launching. So we have plenty to choose from there. And I know the HBAR Foundation is going to be pushing that with incentives as well. And with that, let's get into some network analysis. So the transaction volume on Hedera is looking strong, steady above 2,000 transactions per second. And currently we're above 2,200 transactions per second. That allowed us to process 1.2 billion transactions just this past week with a max TPS of nearly 8,900. Time to consensus finality also looked good. After the latest upgrade, we dropped down from about 3.4 seconds to 3 seconds flat. We also created over 50,000 accounts just this past week. Taking a look at our fungible tokens, we have the normal crew at the top, wrapped HBAR in first, followed by Karate and Dovu. 2. Next up, we have the meme coin Zero, Siki, Energy Trade Token, and Sauce. And to round out the top 10, Native USDC, Body, Mind, and Life, which sounds like a fitness or a wellness token. I don't know too much about it quite yet. And finally, Earthling Steam. Moving down to our NFTs, we have the Malaysian Student Identity Credential, again in the top spot, followed by the Confidence NFT, the 2024 Road Code Access Card, the Saucer Swap Liquidity Provider Token, one I haven't seen before called War Tags, May Madness 2024 trophies, the Not a Slime World NFT, Doctor Who Worlds Apart, a Karateka NFT, and finally Hangry Barboons rounds out the top 10. The featured NFT this week can be found on Kabila and is Michael Bannister's Genius Collection, featuring the likeness of our own Lehman Baird himself. What's really interesting about this one is it's the first dynamic NFT on Kabila. And honestly, it's the first NFT I've heard of that's leveraging this new Hedera capability, period. Now, Zep, I'm not sure if you remember, but I've talked about dynamic NFTs and them coming for a while because I think it has a lot of potential for Twigital. I think that, of course, Twigital tokenizes physical objects and creates these 3D renderings. That's always going to be the top asset. But these collectible items that we treasure are just as much about the story that goes along with these assets as it is about the object itself. So you want to be able to add to that story as you go on. So if you can add additional files to that, so you can potentially add pictures, certificates of authenticity, all kinds of stuff to these NFTs now with this new dynamic feature. And Kabila is helping us out with the tools to be able to do that. So certainly check out some of the tooling that they've launched to leverage this new capability on the Hedera network. Now let's take a look at Hedera DeFi. The total value locked in the Hedera ecosystem is up about 10% to $52.5 million. Saucer Swap holds $48.5 million of that, 8Suite $2.5 million, and HellaSwap $1.5 million. Looking at the HBAR and crypto markets, risk assets had a decent week, which helped the crypto market. Bitcoin is up 3% on the day and 6% on the week to $62,000. And Hedera is even better, up 6% on the day and 13% on the week to about 5.9 cents at the time of recording. I would say we're at a pretty important area of resistance right now, and if we go back down 5 cents will likely be our area of support. All right, Zep, that's pretty much all we have for this week. Is there anything else you'd like to pass on?
Well, I mean, we've seen what is, Mastercard's most ambitious digital asset project so far, i.e. the multi-token network, really have its sort of, debut on Hedera, or even rather have its debut in Web3 via a Hedera project. If David's correct, this is one of the first, if not the first, application to be live on that network, and of course that's directly tied to Hedera. So to know that, I know for a fact that David's been working with their team for a long time now, that there's a lot of very close synergies between FSCO and the Mastercard team over there, of course, with Master Provenance before, but just seeing them continue to be almost like a flagship team, actually, of the Mastercard Web3 department. They were the number one team on Mastercard Provenance, and it seems like they're leading that way again on the multi-token network. So what an amazing team to have for Hedera. Alongside that, we've seen what I think is by far the most exciting hackathon to date. Just going by those 5 projects we've seen so far, and knowing there's over 2,000 applicants alongside that. For me, really, really great breath of fresh air this week for those indie devs, for those smaller dev teams, the OGs, the builders in this ecosystem, and so glad to have seen them all get that spotlight, but Milan in particular really, really take off this week with his own entry.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well covered, Zep. I want to probably grab Milan for next week. He doesn't know this, but I'm going to try to get him for an interview next week. We also are going to try to have an AMA on X around institutional adoption. So I'm going to try to get Copper on for that, and Greg Bell from the foundation as well. We're going to post both the Fresh Supply Company clip as well as the HBAR clip next week to my series on HBAR builders. You can go and check out all the past ones we have, but we're going to continue to try to build out that repository. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.